I think it's where we are in the world and where humanity is right now is what it makes me most bullish. And what I mean by that is I think we're in a fourth turning. So there's this great book called The Fourth Turning, which came out in the 90s by Strauss and How. You got it. Awesome. I'm amazed how popular this book is. I first read it when it came out. I've been mentioning it, on the campaign trail every day, and a lot of people love it and they are big fans. So when I mention it, people like it. But for those who haven't read it, it's a great book. And there's other people. This isn't a unique philosophy by Strauss and How. This is sort of many historians over history have talked about the cycles that humanity goes through, where you go through these 100-year or so time periods, and it's driven by generations and demographics and a lot of other things. But basically power structures rise up and then they fall. And there are these times, a fourth turning every 100 years or so, kind of like clockwork throughout human history, where everything changes just in the blink of an eye. Everything changes. Money changes, systems change, who people trust change, how things work, how people get information, borders, everything. And this has happened again. And this isn't unusual. It's the norm. It's happened again and again and again throughout human history. And we haven't seen it before. None of us are old enough. There's only a few people living today. If you're maybe 100, 110 years old, you could kind of remember when this happened last time. But this is new territory for everybody. The world that we had in 2019 and before, the rules that we had then all growing up, everything we learned, it's all out the window. It's a whole new world now. And everything's shifting and changing. And with that, historically, money has changed. So that alone is pretty bullish. But on top of that, just the fact that there's so much chaos and so much change, and some of it's scary, and we see a lot of it. It's definitely manifested in the last couple of years. The politicians' reaction to COVID was and notice I don't say COVID, because COVID didn't close businesses. Politicians did. The politician reaction to COVID was the pin that popped the bubble that started, probably around, the popularity of the internet going to 2008, when the money started getting fuzzy. 2008 was a wake up call for a lot of us in finance. We said, oh, this is a mess. This is a problem. And so what is happening now is this kind of continuation. Ukraine is a result of this, and all kinds of chaos. We have new ways of thinking, sort of almost like new religions, new ideas rising up, and it's a time of crazy chaos. And it's not going to just end. We're not going to say, oh wow, that was a weird couple of years, 2020 to 22. How about that? No, I think it's going to continue because of nth order effects, we supply chain and all kinds of things like that. And inevitably, unfortunately, we'll probably see a lot more chaos. But the good news from that is that it is a time for people to reevaluate and for new systems. The Clinton Global Initiative and the World Economic Forum and the IMF and Goldman Sachs and these kind of the CNN, New York Times, these are all failing, dying powers. Gen Z, TikTok, Joe Rogan, Bitcoin, these are the rising powers, and the world is shifting right now. So all of the tyrants and the centralized forces and things like that have been mucking around with our world for the last several decades and kind of living on fumes of, reputations that were earned by our ancestors. That's all going to come crumbling down. And it's our opportunity to build something new and better and exciting. And so what better time? Bitcoin came into the world at the right time, and we'll never know if it would have worked without what has happened. But my theory is that the events of especially the last couple of years have sort of created the perfect storm. I mean, the money was broken before, but they kind of could have gotten out of the hole. If we had somebody really good and, they could have gone on a gold standard and, maybe done some other things and kind of slowed down Bitcoin. But now it seems more inevitable than ever because everything else is so broken. It's almost like they've given up. They're just printing and printing and printing money from thin air in hopes that that's going to somehow dig them out of the hole. And I think it's just going to accelerate Bitcoin. And I think that the sea change that we see with all of humanity, not just Bitcoin, all of humanity, we're opening our eyes and we're looking at this. And I see people who never really heard of Bitcoin, but they're starting to care about money and monetary policy. And you better believe when people can't get baby formula or they see the price of lumber increase 6x or something like that, they're going to start doing the same thing that some of our greatest Bitcoiners, you notice, are from places like Argentina and Greece and other places where they, especially early on, Wences, Andreas, there's so many people that came from places that, had bad economic policy. And now we're seeing that firsthand, and we're seeing the results of it. And with this great change, anything can happen. So, you would have never believed me if 2 years ago I said this was going to happen, all this crazy nonsense that's happened over the last 2 years. So there's almost no point of being too bullish. I mean, anything can happen. We're in a fourth turning. So anything can happen. We could see 2 years from now, it could be a completely radically different world. And the bullish part of me says that I hope that world is where Bitcoin is realizing its potential. So we could see Bitcoin do things that it would have never been able to do without the world. If the world was working fine, Bitcoin is kind of cool to us geeks, but it doesn't have as much of a use case. If the world is a complete and total chaotic mess like it is now, Bitcoin is even more appealing. So I think people are waking up to that, and with that, they're learning and they're skeptical, especially Gen Z. Gen Z just doesn't believe anything. There's no way they're going to grow up and be like, oh yes, I'm going to listen to the World Economic Forum and the IMF. They're just not going to. Those institutions are dead, just like CNN and New York Times and everything else. The central powers have had their day, and I think we're going to see a really exciting new world of decentralization, and hopefully Bitcoin as sound money for the world. A global money standard, a Bitcoin standard, at least to some degree. One of the top currencies, if not the top currency. So I think that's really exciting.